In the last video help, we looked at the calendar, and the calendar really has a lot of information that's shared on the calendar when you create a task or an appointment, and that opens up a small screen. Well, the records that are used to fill that up are these that are right here. And what we're doing today is going to show you in this particular video a separation line. The calendar really could fit in here or as far as its basic usage, but then there's some other places like the project planning, which is kind of a departure from the calendar. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you a little bit of the difference. In the schedule, what we were looking at was scheduling the individuals that are going to be doing the work. What happens when we go over to the planning section, this is more or less where the project manager gets involved. And as I slide up here, I'm going to show you this. The project manager has assessed everything above here, and now what he has to do is looking forward at the production process, working with vendors, working with his own company employees, and keeping everybody on track to where they're supposed to go. Hence the planning process. The process is really the big thing in here. You're looking at not just the individual employees and their time and their hours and things like that, and the scheduling, the budget, and tearing the proposal down. The departure here in the planning is now you're looking at what you have to do in order to perform the actual items that are in the listings for the project elements and schedule ID items. For example, if you move down through, you can see there's going to be a lot of records you're going to put in here over a period of time. And I want to point out that there are reports that are going to generate information based on the information you put into these different records that we've created up here. For example, if I went up and I looked at the over here and go over to the app, these screens right here are all reports that are going to be supporting the information and using it over here. For example, you have work orders and printing of work orders, which is kind of down at the bottom. But what happens, you're going to be using these a lot more than you're going to be using the stuff up here. Once this is established and in place, then you're going to be doing work orders, proposal budgets you're going to be adjusting, task manning, you're going to be checking that to make sure that you're on timeline and on cue for getting all the different things done. Scheduling, there's a scheduling report, a project plan report, a specification report, a drawing report, a purchase order report, inventory report, RMA report, and the work orders and invoices that are being reported on. So all of this stuff we're going to cover later on, but what I wanted to do is point out, before we get too far into this, you need to be aware that we're going to be using reports and different things to print and bring information by using the data that we've collected up here. It's going to come back out in this process out here. Okay, with that said, let's go back into the project planning. And you'll see that over here is an area where the project manager makes comments on the individual items that are in the process of being done in the plan. So the plan would say basically where you're starting on this element. And in plain words, the project manager wants to see what has to be accomplished and at what point you're going to accomplish these items and track through them. Now, this is the narrative in here is just to help you to understand what happens in this screen. But if I were doing this, what I would do, and you would, is to put in the comment, first date it, and then put your name in as whoever the project manager that is working on this process. And in this case, it's Fred Smith. And what you're going to do in this case is you're going to take what his requirements are, whatever he's working on. You can even repeat him. Say, for example, you're sharing the effort in the project proposal, and you have a 1.0, and then you have a 1.1, and so forth. Here's 1.0 up here. And these will be sorted in order by the schedule ID number. So if you're up here and you're going to do the initial budgeting process, you would say the budget process needs to be done in this way so that the outcome is this way according to what that particular manager wants as far as program manager. So you'd put the data in there, then you'd move to the next item, and you'd go down through them until you've addressed it or given some text in all these areas that refer to what that particular task is based on the prior up here when we did the scheduling. And now we're explaining the process. The process is when we start, we have to have these things in place. We need to have these parts in place. We need to have what employees need to be aware of and be ready to take on the tasks that are scheduled. And you'll see when we go over to the actual portal for the planning, we're shifting gears, and what we're doing is we're putting the type of work that's going to be done. That's a little bit different. Labor, document creation, proposal, specification, budget drawing, engineering, design, scheduling, programming, looks like I lost a G, fabrication, service, outside service, estimating. Estimating is a little different. One is for a proposal and budget. This one is estimating, say like you have a vendor and he's going to provide something, or you're estimating something within in-house, and that could be what you're talking about as far as the process. And these are process notes over here. So what we're looking through, and everything that's applicable in the planning, you would have a different requirement for it, and you would explain the process. Okay, so the process being I need a plate, or say I need to have a PC board ready to be loaded, or 30 PC boards, or whatever you're doing. It would be the hardware and the process to bring those to a deliverable item. So you'd have to have something that describes these, and it would be for this particular thing. Now, in case it's budget report, maybe I'm going to be doing like a spec drawing, or spec costing, drawing development, or whatever, planning process, or whatever it may be as far as the status is concerned. And of course you can edit all of these so that you can change them to whatever you need to add or have them do, okay? Budget estimating, all the things you're doing, like in this case maybe it's the WBS, and I'm going to define the WBS. Well, the outcome of this is I have to look at what? The individual thing for 1.0, and 1.0 is the budget research. What do I need in the process to create the budget resource? If I didn't receive the actual proposal, planned budget, I can't really think about how I'm supposed to do this. So in the timeline, the process needs to have certain items in order to create the item or the process that's being done. Over here you have a PDF container, and in the PDF container, what you can do, we're in a popover, so that it's not going to actually allow you can zoom in and do certain things on the iPad and so forth, but in order to see this where you're really working with it, you come up here in the portal, you click on it, and now you can scroll through this. Now the PDF portal, in this particular case where you're looking at the plan, the same information comes over from that portal record for the 1.0. In this case, I might have any kind of document to support this particular process. For example, if I did a budget report and I was looking at the budget report in this area, in the research, maybe I want to have a research document in here that I created to back up all the information that I have in here. And this is an individual record in the product process, and I could have many of these as I needed them. And in this particular case, this one's for budget research. Let's go back and back over here. And now what I'm doing is I'm scrolling through all the different things. And for in this particular case, budget engineering, this is going to take a world of work, and maybe a galaxy of work in order to get this one done. By the way, what I'm trying to show here is that you can actually stick a graphic in here of any kind that you want to. So if you're getting down in the processes where you're going through all the processes, maybe you want to put a picture of a circuit board or anything like that. Well, it'll work in this field. You could add that if you wanted to. By doing that, I would just say insert a file or insert a picture. Either way, a file would be a document, insert a picture would be like I did here. And when you say insert it, it's going to take you out to your desktop, and you're going to be able to pick what you want and then put it into that particular field. Okay, now some things on the server, if this is a hosted app, will be slightly different. The menus will look slightly different, but the accomplishment of everything we're doing here would work the same. Typically, when you're working with something like a PDF document, it is actually stored in the app itself. It's not stored on the server. Where if you go to the project planning up here, now you've got things that you're not actually storing here. But say, for example, I had a process I'm going to do, and I actually have a video of the process. If I store that video on YouTube and put the URL in here, in this thing, I could store it here as far as the URL is concerned, and I can have up to 6 items per one individual record. If I copy the URL and paste it in here and usually what you want to do is after the URL, give a space and then put what that name of that item is. In this particular case, if I said inserting things on a PC board, then the video would show us doing that as it's a process, a part of the process. In this case, it's something being managed, or it could be a site survey. Maybe I had gone to a civil engineering site where I'm actually doing something like pouring a slab and putting in electrical components or a circuit board, not a board, but a PC board. Any of that kind of thing that I can do in here. I can have up to 6 videos of those and have the URL to show them from YouTube. And then when I do that, I just click on the go to URL with the URL in there, and it will open that particular video and play it. If you're on a desktop, it'll play on your desktop. If it's on the iPad, it'll play in a video container, and it will be the size of the screen and so forth. So these are the kind of things that you can put into this application besides the actual comments from the program manager. And then over here on the planning portal, you have those other things that are in here, like the type of thing that you're doing, planning element, the element status, start date, end date, and the status itself, which would be the items in here, like scheduled and not scheduled. And of course, you can do like you always do with these, be able to edit them, whatever makes you have the things provided that you need. You can add to this list in the status. And then, of course, who provided the information for this particular thing. If you're a project manager like Michael, or Martin up here rather, and say you had somebody else doing it as far as providing the information, it might even be a vendor. You'd have a vendor providing you something. If it is a vendor, add your vendor's name, the company name, the vendor contact, the phone number, the contacts. If it's a vendor and they're going to provide something to you, you add a little bit more where it says the start date and the conclude date when they're supposed to be providing you. It might be something for a spec, it might be something for a hardware item, or it may be the whole hardware item itself that they're going to provide to you. And then you would put the process steps that are required. Maybe you provide the specification for the item, and then they provide the hardware, and then they deliver it back to you. It gives you all the flexibility and the ability in the world on the plan to see how this is going to be delivered in the final form, whatever it might be, either a paper document, hardware, or something else. So you have all those entities that come in being the elements and what they're doing in design engineering and so forth in production. It might be a vendor meeting or deliverables or a purchasing item or a billing item or whatever. So it would be in here as far as being able to tell who gets what, when, where, and how. Okay, so this is what you're doing in the planning project area. And particularly the kind of items that you would be doing here are after the normal budgeting has already been assumed and kind of derived back in the scheduling and the manpower areas where you're going to actually schedule something to be done by somebody. So this is the part where you're initiating the actual accepted the contract, and now we're going to go out and do this thing. And typically you wouldn't go into it, or you may want to go into it in depth if you're pretty sure you're going to win the project, because you're not going to do a specification and project drawings and inventory and all that kind of stuff until you've actually got the contract. So this is how you want to deliver the process once you have the contract in hand and you understand all this above this, which is the cost items and scheduling up here. Okay, if you have any issues and you need to learn a little bit more about what you're doing, you can go ahead and ask those questions. But I'm going to pop over here and show you something else ahead of time because we're going to get ahead on this. Task manning. When you went to the calendar and you needed to see what was going to happen in what order it was going to happen, you still do the task manning as far as the items and the other things that we looked at above here over on the other side, those other buttons. Because you need to know who's doing what. This would be a chronological list by the order of the schedule ID, and it provides you a list that will even show up in the calendar so you can schedule. If you are doing all these items, you still have a project. You haven't cut it loose and signed the contract yet, but you can take this stuff into account down to the point where you get the contract and now you start producing the plan and the final schedule based on what you put into the manning document up here, where you were looking at schedule and manpower usages. So it's kind of a not everything is all together at one time because it doesn't make sense to plan something until you actually have a contract to do it. And then you finalize your plan over here to show the actual times and things. And if vendors are going to be delivering something to you, you take each record by itself. For example, this is an individual record 1.0, 1.1, and so forth down to the point where you're going to actually initiate the contract, and then you would put in all the rest of the commitments that you have and put them on the calendar in the main calendar for the project. So there's a certain amount of work that's done up front to get the contract and submit it, and then the process of actually doing everything, and then tasking people to do the items you need to do. And the last thing is to follow up on the budget. You go in here now that you won the contract and you're actually going to be doing stuff instead of these being estimated things on the budget. Now you're going in and you're actually smoothing everything out to make sure that it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, schedule it, and look at the rest of the stuff to make sure it's all in line with what you schedule and your planning tells you you have to do. So we're all the way down through the blue screens, and as far as everything that has to be added, recalling now that these are all where you create the records, and then the portals are the places where you modify, edit, or do additional things.